This is the golden question. Hello. Welcome to episode 14 of the Golden Question podcast. And in today's episode, we are going to be answering the question, what does the Fed and nihilism have in common? I've always wanted to make a video on this and a recording on this to talk about why I think the embodiment of the Fed beautifully portrays what happens when you have uh, this sort of nihilism that emerges due to the lack and belief of a God. And there's many different aspects that nihilism affects in life. You could look at it in terms of crime. You could look at it in many different avenues, and you could see the devastation that occurs due to the lack in belief and the rise of nihilism. And what we see with the Fed and the actions of the Fed is nihilism spreading to sort of the wave of nihilism also spreading towards the economic realm of society. And we it's not, the United States isn't special. This is happening all over the world, and it's happened in the past. But I think it's more serious now than it is before, and it's more serious in the United States given the power that the United States has now, and its dominance on the political landscape. A lot of the times, whenever the Fed commits to something, right, commits to lower interest rates or commits to printing trillions of dollars, any normal person would realize, wait a second, there has to be some consequence of this. It's not as easy as just printing money and the economy going up, right? There's not a one-to-one correlation. There has to be some unintended side effect. Just as if you were to take, a pain reliever, the side effect is that it makes you drowsy. Anything in life really isn't just to some win gain. So there's always going to be one side that wins and one side that loses, or if one side wins, there's going to be some certain side effects that may be negative. And I want to bring this up, but I think I'm playing this game called Europa Universalis 4, and it's a really interesting game. I might do some sort of Let's Play, although I don't want to get into gaming, although I might make a separate channel where I play through it. And I play through a lot of the Paradox interactive games just because it's a sort of a sandbox of politics, economics, and everything all summed into one, which is stuff that really interests me. But in the game, every action that I take has a consequence. Now the game is somewhat realistic. I mean, it's not 100% realistic of all the things that governments can do. So there are some consequences that are sort of played out a little bit, and some benefits that are also played out. So it's not entirely accurate, but it gives me a good conception of whenever I'm a ruler or some authoritative figure and I want to commit to an action, I always have to be wary about the side effects, the unintended consequences. And when I'm playing this game, I'm going through decisions. I mean, that's the whole point of making a decision, is you have to weigh the benefits and the downsides. You have to weigh those two. Now, what the Fed is doing is it claims that there's only one way to do something, and that way is going to be the right way, and there's no other unintended consequences, and that the other option is completely negative. There are no pros, no positives to that action. So it's sort of, again, it's not the Fed again isn't the way it's framing itself is it's not setting up. It's not giving itself a decision. It's not setting up a choice for itself. By saying one way is 100% and the other way is 0%, that's not a decision. That's just forcefully doing something. But unfortunately, there are obviously clear unintended consequences with printing money, keeping interest rates, the Fed funds rate at a low, at near zero levels. And again, I dive more into interest rates in other videos. So when I say the Fed keeping low interest rates, I'm not advocating for higher interest rates, but I'm not going to get into it in this podcast. If I've gotten into it in another podcast, and I might make more podcasts discussing the role of interest rates in an economy. But currently, the current situation is that the Fed is keeping interest rates low. It's printing trillions and trillions of dollars. It's keeping this debt bubble going, and it assumes that there's no consequence. Now, obviously, I do think that the Fed knows that there are consequences. It's just that they don't want to admit the consequences, because if they did, the public would know that their actions that they're taking are actually wrong. They should be taking actions in the other direction. But ultimately, these unintended consequences don't happen right away. And that's the special thing. I think this is the miracle that I'm starting to see with the Fed, is that the benefits happen now and the downsides happen in the future. Now, for any, I would say, corrupt individual, or any individual who doesn't really care, I frankly like to put it, somebody who doesn't believe in God, somebody who doesn't have a moral objective basis, will always sacrifice the now for the future. Because hey, he might, he's rolling the dice. He might not live in the future, so he just takes the positive action now. And even if somebody else gets to suffer because of his actions, he's dead. I mean, he's not gonna have to face any repercussions after he's dead, because he knows that as soon as he dies, the lights out. That's it. And I'm seeing this happen with the Fed and a lot of investors and people in the Fed, and especially in government. And this is the problem, I think, with having a government set up in this way, where you have individuals who make actions that may have positive benefits now, but negative consequences in the future. And so they take the positive now, and they push the negative in the future, so that when they die or when they're not in office anymore, those problems get passed on. And again, that's where the analogy comes from, kicking the can down the road. You have the problem, and you have to deal with it, but you can push it down the road. But the more you push it down the road, the bigger it gets. And this is the irony, really. This is the way that life is set up, right? If you have a problem and you try to avoid it, by avoiding it, you might get a slight gain, a slight benefit now. But now that problem actually gets bigger and gets moved on in the future. And that's why, it's never the case that you have a problem that you could just postpone and then you deal with the problem at the same degree that you were going to deal with it now, right? If there's a and again, a lot of economists bring up the example of the drug addict or the alcoholic, which is a beautiful example, and it's one that you could look towards always if you want to help yourself conceptualize this. If you have an alcoholic who keeps drinking, or a drug addict who keeps taking drugs, he can either stop now and he'll suffer some withdrawal now, but in the future he won't become addicted to it. Or the second option is he stops taking the drugs, he stops drinking. He continues taking the drugs, he continues drinking, and he pushes that withdrawal that he must come to solve his problem in the future. So he continues doing what he's doing. Now, the level of degree that he faces the withdrawal isn't going to be the same as it is now. I mean, the further he pushes it to the future, the bigger his addiction grows, and the more, frankly, the more addicted he gets to the drug or to the alcohol, which makes the withdrawal psychologically even harder. And you could see this even in the economic sphere, right? In the economic realm, where you have bad monetary policy that encourages people to go into debt, that inflates a bubble. If the bubble is small and you pop it now, you're just going to have to suffer those small repercussions from that tiny bubble. But the further you push the bubble down the road, by definition, you're inflating the bubble because the bubble's deflating. And when the bubble inflates, it's obviously getting bigger, and over time, and it gets bigger over time, and then you have to face an even larger downside, an even larger crash when you actually face the burst of that bubble in the future. So you see this everywhere in life. Now, ultimately, what's preventing these people from not taking the actions now? Why don't they want to solve the problem now? And I think it's because of this nihilism that is infecting society, um, you know, psychologically, socially, and it's this nihilistic tendencies that people that especially atheists have, in which I'm gonna do whatever it takes to live now, to make my life happy, because at the end of the day, if I die, when I die, that's it. I mean, there's no ultimate judger that's gonna have to come and then tell me why I did this. All these people suffered in the future because of me, right? Ultimately, I don't care about the future. I don't care what happens after I die. As long as what happens in my life is good, that's all that matters. And when you look at these decisions that come up to people where they have to sacrifice the now for the future, for their children, I mean, this is the whole idea of posterity, for their children, for their future children, for future communities, for humanity as a whole. If you want to see humanity progress in the future, this stuff is happening way beyond your lifetime. So when you make these decisions, you have to sacrifice your own life, the life that you're living now, the time between now until you die. You have to sacrifice that, whether it be enjoyment, lowered income, lowered benefits. You have to sacrifice this period so that after you die, other people can reap the benefits of your sacrifices, and ultimately you will get rewarded in this afterlife. But that's not what people are thinking. This is not the sentiment that's being promulgated. The Fed, along with politicians, and I mean, you could, again, as I said, you could look at this from any aspect of social life. Once you remove the idea of an afterlife, this idea of an ultimate judge, this afterlife punishment, what is the point of making society better, after you're dead? What is the point, right? If you die and you enjoyed your life, it's a win, right? And again, as I said, when you die, the lights go out. That's it. It's almost as if nothing happened. And this is the nihilistic tendency, and I like to frame it like that we're seeing the Fed now experience, where they're pushing this problem further and further down. The further they push it, the more this debt economy builds up. The more the government starts to grow, and we're gonna suffer the consequences of this large government. But right now, it's quasi benefiting us, but in the future it will harm us. Just the concept of having a large government, where yes, I want a large government. Right now, it's going to give me all these good things, but the moment somebody gets into power that I don't like, they can use all that power against me. But who cares? That's in the future. That's after I'm dead. Right now, I have a government that agrees with me. And again, from an economics point, as I said, this idea of continuing this debt bubble, it's creating artificial demand, making people feel like they're wealthier through inflation, making people have a sense of security with with their paper profits and their inflated brokerage accounts, their inflated house prices, inflated car prices, inflated collectibles. You can throw that in there too. So as long as these people feel good now and they reap the benefits, right? They can. The Fed is printing trillions and trillions of dollars. They can go into debt easy. They don't have to actually work. They could just go to a bank and demand some money for some incredibly low interest rates, and they could just keep reinstalling new loans, going into more debt to pay the previous debt, which is essentially what the government is doing, right? It's never paying off its debt. It's just going into debt again to pay off the previous debt, and then going into debt a third time to pay off the second time's debt. And it just continues this cycle. Ultimately it will end, right? The dollar can hang on for only a short amount of time before the people just lose trust and lose a sense of value and security with this dollar. But hey, that's in the future. We don't have to worry about that. That's after I'm dead. Right now, let me enjoy my life. Once I die, who cares about what my kids do, what the future is? Because that's, for me, the lights go out. I just enjoyed my life. I'm not going to get judged. I'm not going to have a sense of reflection after I die where I get to see my kids. I get to see the world around me, right? After I'm dead, lights out, it's almost as if I had never existed. And this is the nihilistic tendency that we're seeing. And it's having severe consequences in the economic realm, the political realm, but I'm going to focus mainly on the economic realm. So, this is why I think it's extremely important to have a sense, and again, I don't like to really get religious, but I think it's, in some cases, it's important, and it mingles so well with economics here that I have to point it out. And that is, you have to have a sense of afterlife in order to have a successful, functioning society. Because if you don't, you'll have economic problems where people continue to take on debt, inflate bubbles, go through bad monetary policy that'll give them short-term gain but long-term pain, and that gain outweighs the pain that they'll to them. That gain outweighs the pain that future generations will face. But if you have this sense of afterlife, and you have this sense of judgment, right, this ultimate judge that'll judge you on your actions, then it does make sense to sacrifice yourself for the betterment of the future, for the betterment of others, even after you're gone, even after you die. Then it makes sense. And that's when you have a functioning society. That's when you have a functioning economy, because that's the whole point of saving, right? Saving is you're hindering your buying of goods now, so that in the future you can spend more, or the wealth could get passed down to your kids, or that money that you saved you can allow others to invest with it, and allow other companies to start up that'll survive long after you're gone. And so the whole economy functions about it centers itself and rests on this idea that you need to care about the future. That's the only way free markets work, is if you care about the future. That's the only way capitalism works. The idea of building capital, right? That's the only way it works. And remove the belief in an afterlife, remove the belief in God, right? And when you die, that's it. Lights are out. Nothing matters anymore. It's almost as if you never existed. You can't have a functioning economy. You could try to persuade people, hey, we need people to save, but who cares? That person telling him to save will completely go out of existence as soon as the person hearing it dies. So why should I listen to him and sacrifice myself for the betterment of others? Meanwhile, when I die, that's it. This is all I've got. And that's why a lot of people who try to bring some optimism to nihilism, they tend to say it's a good thing that to know that this is the only life you've got, because then you might treat it special. But I don't see that at all. I see the complete opposite. I see that this is the only life that I got. Let me do as much. Let me have as much fun as I want in it, and let me not sacrifice anything. Because again, as I said, and the point that I'm trying to get across is when you're having fun, when you're enjoying yourself, you're not benefiting anyone. And in fact, you might be hurting others, because in the future, your missed sacrifices will not be there in the future. And I mean, a perfect example is, let's say I'm someone who just spends every dollar that I earn. I benefit, right? I have all these goods and services around me. I have my iPad, I have my TV, I have my keyboard, I have a nice massage, I have a couple movies that I watch, I have a nice house, a nice car. I benefit. And then when I die, that's it. It all goes with me. It had no effect on anybody else. But if I saved my money, right? I lived a minimalistic life. I saved a portion of my money so that in the future my kids can invest in it, can use it. Somebody else could invest it and use it. Somebody else could use it to grow a company. Then I benefit others. But I have to face the inhibited lifestyle that I'm having in this scenario. And so by spending all my money, I've failed to help others, whether it be my children or that other company who will use my money to start up. So under that timeline where I spend all my money, I've actually hurt society, because I could have helped society if I'd taken this other timeline, this other track. So by spending money, by only caring about your own life, the enjoyment of yourself, you actually hurt society, because you could have used that money instead to help others, to invest, to save for your children, for others. And if you don't have a belief in an afterlife, you don't have a belief in this ultimate judge, then it becomes obsolete. And this is why I think it's important for, and I do see some atheists who make these claims. And I think it was Brett Weinstein, I think that's his name. He made this claim where, you know what? I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. However, I really hope nobody else is an atheist. So he comes to the conclusion that for him, God doesn't exist. But he hopes that everybody else accepts God and thinks that God exists, because he thinks that that's the only way for society to advance. It's this evolutionary trait that humans got, and it gave us a competitive advantage against other creatures and against other humans who didn't believe in God. And that's why we see this that's why we see this belief in God emerge and grow, while societies where humans lived that didn't believe in God are almost non-existent, right? I mean, if you look at humanity as a whole, every single niche crater of human settlement, all the different groups and indigenous groups all have a sense of belief. What happened to any groups that lacked any belief? There are none. And under Brett Weinstein's conclusion, those people died out. The people who believed in God emerged successfully because of this trait, in which, in order for society to advance, they need to care about the future. And you can only care about the future if you have an ultimate judge, if you believe in an afterlife. And that's why this idea prevailed. So to him, the conclusion is, yeah, I'm an atheist, but man, society will come crushing down if everybody becomes an atheist. So I'm an atheist, but I sure hope no one else is. And I think that's the conclusion that he came with. Now, I do believe that God exists, but a lot of the times I sympathize with people who come to a conclusion to themselves that God doesn't exist, but they understand that it's necessary in society. And in that, and I try to then persuade people that isn't that a miracle? That the only way for society to advance is not whether or not we have a centimeter long legs, or we have eyes that can adjust, or all these biological traits. It's fundamentally the belief in God that gives us this competitive advantage over every other creature, right? Even other humans. And to me, I see that as a miracle, and I see that as a part of God's plan, in which He creates this world in which the only way for you to advance is to believe in Him. Because if you don't, you will just die out. You will fall out of the timeline. And those who do believe in God are the only ones that progress. And ultimately, I think this is what gives me sort of faith in humanity, that despite us seeing this rise in atheism, they're all going to die out. I mean, if you're an atheist, you don't care about the future. You only care about this limited lifetime that you're given, this consciousness. What's the whole point of having kids and knowing that they grow up, or doing anything of good, right? Doing anything that can actually help further advance. And I think that's why there's probably a statistic out there that atheists on average have less kids than people who have some form of faith. There's probably statistics out there that claim that show that atheists commit more crime on average than people who have faith. So there's statistics out there that show you that when you believe in God, you have these competitive advantages over those who don't. So hopefully I answer the question, the Fed and its nihilistic tendencies, and how this is very destructive for the future of humanity, for other countries, for other banks, central banks, for other civilizations that try to adopt this nihilistic view. And ultimately, if you don't believe in God, if you don't believe in an ultimate judger, if you don't believe in an afterlife, then there is no point for you to have good monetary policy, because you are going to do whatever makes the current situation better at the expense of the future conditions. And given that the future conditions are further away, probably out of your lifetime, they don't matter to you. Thanks for listening, and stay safe.